These documents are historically interesting, Mr. Devereaux, is it? The man in the $3,000 suit didn't wait for confirmation. He stood at the records counter with his shoulders squared and his voice pitched to carry. 4 clerks had stopped working to watch. A security guard lingered near the door, but they're legally meaningless. Theodore Nash spread his hands in a gesture of patient condescension. You can't just walk in here and claim ownership of 14 city blocks because you found some old papers in your grandmother's attic. Marcus Devereaux did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply pointed to the document on the counter between them. The filing stamp was fresh. Case number 2024 CV 8847, officially recorded in the Fulton County system, time stamped 43 minutes ago. The filing is complete, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, unhurried. Your client has been served. Nash's smile tightened. He turned to the young woman behind the counter. Her nameplate read CFONG. I need to speak with your supervisor. Cynthia Fong glanced at Marcus. Something flickered across her face, uncertainty or maybe curiosity. She picked up her phone. 2 minutes later, Martha Chen emerged from the back office. She had managed the Fulton County Records Department for 22 years. She had seen every kind of filing come through this basement: divorces, bankruptcies, land disputes, claims against the state. Nothing surprised her anymore, or so she thought. She picked up Marcus's filing and began to read. Nash waited with his arms crossed, confident that this would end quickly. It did not end quickly. Martha turned to the second page, then the third. Her eyebrows drew together. She returned to the first page and started again. Mr. Devereaux, she looked up at him. This is comprehensive. Thank you. Extremely comprehensive. She set the filing down. In my 22 years, I have never seen a Pro C filing this thorough. Correct forms, correct filing fees, supporting documentation indexed and cross-referenced. She paused. This is better than most attorney submissions. Nash's smile had frozen in place. The question isn't whether the filing is thorough. The question is whether it has any legal merit, which it doesn't. The merit will be determined by Judge Okafor, Marcus said. That's why I filed it. He reached into a cardboard box at his feet. The box was worn at the corners, not new but carefully maintained. He withdrew a flat object wrapped in acid-free archival paper. This is the original deed, he said. Recorded in 1923. He unwrapped it slowly. The paper inside was thick, almost cloth-like. It had aged to the color of old piano keys, not yellow, but cream with brown at the edges, the way documents age when they're stored properly, away from light. The signature at the bottom swept across the page in elegant loops. Josephine Devereaux. The handwriting of a woman who had been taught that penmanship revealed character. Martha Chen leaned forward. Cynthia Fong craned her neck to see. The deed recorded a purchase, 14.3 acres of land in what was then the northern edge of Atlanta. Purchase price, $3,400. Buyer, Josephine Devereaux. Date, April 7, 1923. The property description matched the modern coordinates in Marcus's filing. The same land, the same boundaries, 101 years later. This is remarkable, Martha said. The condition, the provenance, it's remarkable as a historical artifact, Nash interrupted. But 1923 was a long time ago. The Harrington family has held clear title to this property since 1931, 93 years of documented ownership. Whatever claim Mr. Devereaux believes he has, it was extinguished decades before he was born. Marcus carefully rewrapped the deed and returned it to its archival sleeve. The 1931 transfer was fraudulent, he said. That's a serious accusation. Yes, it is, Nash laughed. The sound was sharp and practiced, the laugh of a man who had learned to weaponize amusement. And you have proof of this fraud against one of the most established families in Georgia? Yes. The single word hung in the air. Nash's laugh died. You understand, Nash said slowly, that the Harrington Development Group will contest this filing with every resource at our disposal. Expert witnesses, forensic analysis, the best attorneys in the state. We will bury you in depositions. We'll drown you in motions. And when we're finished, you will have nothing but legal bills and public humiliation. I understand. Then you understand that this is pointless. Whatever you think you know, Henderson v. Georgia Land Trust, Marcus said. Nash stopped mid-sentence. You cited it incorrectly, Marcus continued. Earlier, when you were explaining to Ms. Chen why my filing had no merit, you said Henderson, 1989, but the case was decided in 1987. And the holding was narrower than you implied. The court found that adverse possession claims are time-barred after 20 years of continuous occupation, but that ruling doesn't apply when the original transfer was obtained through fraud. Fraud vitiates title, always. The statute of limitations doesn't begin to run until the fraud is discovered. Nash stared at him. I discovered the fraud, Marcus said, when I compared the 1923 deed with the 1931 transfer document. The signature on the 1931 document is not my great-grandmother's handwriting. I have 14 other authenticated samples that prove it. The 1931 deed is a forgery, and under Georgia law, a forged deed conveys nothing. The Harrington family has never owned this land. They have occupied it. They have developed it. But they have never owned it. The silence in the records department was absolute. Howard University, Marcus said, School of Law, class of 1996. I passed the Georgia bar on my first attempt. Nash's face had gone pale. You're an attorney. I am licensed to practice law in the state of Georgia. I chose not to practice. Marcus glanced around the basement room, the fluorescent lights, the rows of filing cabinets, the smell of old paper and dust. I chose to work here instead. In the records department for 19 years. Why? Because this is where the evidence was. Nash took a step backward. His hand moved toward his pocket, toward his phone. Mr. Nash. Marcus's voice was still quiet, still patient. You should call your client. You should tell them that this case is real. You should tell them that I have the original deed, authenticated by state archival standards. You should tell them that I have forensic analysis proving the 1931 transfer was forged. And you should tell them, he paused. Tell them what? Marcus smiled. It was a small smile, and there was something behind it that made Nash take another step back. Tell them that I know about the survey marker. Nash's expression shifted. Confusion flickered beneath the arrogance. What survey marker? They'll know. Marcus picked up his cardboard box and tucked it under his arm. Have a good afternoon, Mr. Nash. I'll see you in court. He walked toward the basement stairs. His footsteps echoed on the old linoleum. Behind him, Nash stood frozen at the counter. His phone was in his hand now, but he hadn't dialed. Cynthia Fong watched Marcus go with something new in her eyes. Martha Chen was reading the filing again, slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. Marcus climbed the stairs. 19 years. 7,000 days in this basement, filing other people's documents, watching other people's cases, learning exactly where every record was stored and how every system worked. 7,000 days of patience. He pushed through the door into the afternoon light. The Atlanta skyline rose before him, glass and steel and construction cranes. And there, half-finished against the clouds, stood the Meridian Tower. $240 million of concrete and ambition, climbing toward the sky. Built on his great-grandmother's land, his phone buzzed, a text from his Aunt Dorothy. I saw the news alert, you actually did it. He typed back, it's just the beginning. Behind him, through the courthouse walls, he could hear Nash's voice rising. The man was finally making his call. Marcus could imagine the conversation, the disbelief, the anger, the scrambling. Good. Let them scramble. Let them pull the 1931 documents from the Harrington family archives. Let them search for proof that the transfer was legitimate, because Marcus had spent 19 years in this building. 19 years with access to every record, every filing, every document that passed through county hands. And 12 years ago, during a renovation of the Harrington corporate offices, their historical records had been temporarily stored in county facilities. For 3 months. 3 months was enough. Marcus knew exactly what was in those archives. He knew about the memorandum in Warren Harrington's handwriting. He knew about the surveyor's report that was never filed. He knew about the 11 discrepancies between the original transfer and the authenticated records. The Harringtons thought their secrets were safe. They thought 93 years had buried the truth. They were wrong. Marcus walked toward the parking deck. Above him, the construction cranes of the Meridian Tower stood motionless against the sky, but not for long. Soon, those cranes would stop entirely. Soon, Theodore Nash would understand what he was actually facing. And soon, very soon, Preston Harrington III would learn that the quiet clerk in the basement had been watching his family for almost 2 decades. Waiting, planning, ready. 1 week later, Courtroom 8 held more spectators than it had seen in months. Word travels fast through a courthouse. The clerk who filed a billion-dollar claim, the law degree hidden for 19 years. The Harrington family scrambling to respond. By the time Judge Patricia Okaffer took the bench, every seat in the gallery was filled. Marcus Devereux sat alone at the plaintiff's table. 2 cardboard file boxes rested at his feet, the same worn boxes from the records department. He wore the same gray suit he'd worn to work every Tuesday for the past decade. The defense table told a different story. 6 attorneys in matching navy suits. 3 paralegals with laptops open. Leather briefcases lined up like soldiers. Theodore Nash sat at the center of this formation, his posture radiating the confidence of a man backed by unlimited resources. And in the front row of the gallery, watching with the detached interest of someone observing a minor inconvenience, sat Preston Harrington III. Marcus had never seen him in person. The photographs didn't capture the studied casualness of his posture. The way he held his coffee cup like the courtroom was a cafe he happened to be passing through. Preston Harrington looked at Marcus the way you look at a speed bump, briefly, before forgetting it exists. "Your Honor." Teddy Nash rose, buttoning his jacket in a single smooth motion. The defense moves to dismiss this action on grounds of statute of limitations, laches, and failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. He spoke for 8 minutes. His voice was measured, almost kind, the tone of a surgeon explaining why an operation isn't necessary. He cited precedents, referenced property law, acknowledged the historical poignancy of Marcus's claim, while methodically explaining why it was legally meaningless. The Harrington family has held clear title to this property for 93 years, Nash concluded. Whatever grievance Mr. Devereux believes he has inherited, it was extinguished generations before he was born. Judge Okaffer's expression revealed nothing. She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Devereux, your response." Marcus stood. He did not approach the podium. He did not raise his voice. "Your Honor, I don't dispute the timeline. I dispute the premise." He paused. "Mr. Nash argues that the 1931 transfer was legitimate and that time has validated it. But Georgia law is clear. Fraud vitiates title. A forged deed conveys nothing, regardless of how many years pass. You're claiming forgery," Judge Okaffer said. "That's a serious accusation against a documented transfer." "Yes, Your Honor, and I'm asking the court to examine the evidence." Nash was on his feet. "Objection. Any authentication request is premature. The defense hasn't had adequate time to prepare expert testimony." "I'm not requesting expert testimony," Marcus said. "I'm requesting that the court's own forensic authentication system examine both documents, the original 1923 deed and the 1931 transfer." The courtroom went quiet. Judge Okaffer studied Marcus for a long moment. Then she turned to Nash. "Mr. Nash, are you objecting to the use of the county's standard authentication protocols?" Nash hesitated. Objecting to court protocols would look like he had something to hide. Accepting meant subjecting his client's foundational document to forensic scrutiny. "No objection, Your Honor." "Then let's proceed." The county forensic technician was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Helen Marsh. She worked for the court system, not for either party. Her job was simple: compare documents, report findings, let the evidence speak. She set up the display screens so everyone in the courtroom could see. The original 1923 deed appeared on the left. The 1931 transfer document appeared on the right. "I'll begin with the original document," Dr. Marsh said. Her voice was flat, clinical. "Paper composition is consistent with manufacturing standards from the 1920s. hand-torn edges, as was common practice. Ink formulation matches period-appropriate iron gall compounds. She zoomed in on Josephine Devereux's signature. The signature shows consistent pen pressure, natural flow, and matches the baseline samples provided from other authenticated documents. Conclusion: this signature is genuine. Marcus watched the Harrington legal team. Two of the junior attorneys were taking notes. Teddy Nash sat very still. Now the 1931 document. Dr. Marsh switched focus to the transfer deed. At first glance, it looked identical to thousands of other property transfers from that era: yellowed paper, formal language, signature at the bottom. Paper composition is consistent with 1930s manufacturing, Dr. Marsh said. However, I've identified 11 points of inconsistency. The screen highlighted the first discrepancy in red. Point 1. The paper edges are machine cut, not hand torn. Machine cutting wasn't standard practice for legal documents until the mid-1940s. Another highlight appeared. Point 2. The ink formulation contains synthetic compounds that weren't commercially available until 1938. The highlights multiplied, spacing irregularities, a watermark positioned incorrectly for the stated date, fiber patterns inconsistent with the paper mill that supposedly produced the document. And then Dr. Marsh reached the signature. Point 11, the signature. She overlaid the 1931 signature with Josephine's authenticated samples. The courtroom displays showed the comparison in high resolution. The 1931 signature exhibits hesitation marks at the beginning of each letter, consistent with someone copying rather than writing naturally. The loops in the J and D show mechanical reproduction rather than confident execution. She stepped back from the display. Josephine Devereux's authentic signature has confidence. This signature has fear. In my professional opinion, this document is a forgery. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Your Honor, we request a brief recess. Teddy Nash's voice was steady, but something had changed in his posture. The easy confidence was gone. He stood like a man who had just discovered the floor beneath him wasn't solid. 15 minutes, Judge Okafor said. Marcus watched the Harrington team file into the hallway. Through the courtroom doors, he could see them clustering, voices low and urgent. Teddy's hands moved as he spoke, not the controlled gestures of his opening statement, but the sharp movements of a man losing control of a situation. Preston Harrington approached his legal team. The detached amusement was gone from his face. He asked a question. Teddy shook his head. Preston asked another question, more forcefully. Teddy spread his hands in a gesture that clearly meant "I don't know." When court resumed, Teddy had regrouped. His voice was calm again, but the strategy had shifted. Your Honor, even if the court accepts these forensic findings, which we contest, the plaintiff faces an insurmountable problem. Teddy walked toward the center of the courtroom. He cannot establish the boundaries of the original Devereux parcel with any certainty. Property lines in 1923 were imprecise. The land has been subdivided, developed, transformed. Mr. Devereux has an interesting historical document, but he cannot prove what land it actually describes. It was a good argument. Boundaries change, surveys are lost. Paper records from a century ago can't compete with decades of development and recorded transactions. Marcus reached into his second file box. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit C. He withdrew an object wrapped in cloth. The fabric was old, faded to the color of dust. Marcus set it on the counsel table and unwrapped it slowly. The bronze disc caught the courtroom lights, 4 inches across, 1 inch thick. The surface had turned green with age, but the engraving was sharp enough to read from the gallery. Georgia State Survey DVX Parcel, NE Corner Reg. No 0019234471, under Georgia's original survey marker doctrine, Marcus said, established in Fuller v. Coastal Properties and reaffirmed in Metropolitan Development Corp. v. Henderson, physical survey markers placed at the time of original conveyance constitute primary evidence of property boundaries. They supersede subsequent paper documentation. He placed his hand on the bronze disc. The metal was cold, heavy, real. This marker was placed by Georgia State surveyors on September 15, 1923. It was scheduled for removal on March 22, 1931, 1 week after the forged deed was filed. My great-grandmother paid a surveyor to recover it before the removal crew arrived. Marcus looked at Teddy Nash. It has been in my family's possession for 93 years. Its registration number matches the original survey records I preserved and authenticated during my 19 years in this county's records department. Teddy Nash said nothing. His mouth opened, then closed. Behind him, one of the junior attorneys was frantically searching through files, looking for something that could challenge this evidence. They wouldn't find it. Marcus had checked. Judge Okafor examined the marker. She compared the registration number to the survey records Marcus had submitted. Her expression didn't change, but her voice carried new weight. I'm issuing a temporary injunction. All Harrington development activities on the disputed parcel will cease until the ownership question is resolved. Preston Harrington stood up in the gallery. His coffee cup was forgotten on the bench beside him. Your Honor, Mr. Harrington, you are not counsel of record. Please remain seated. Preston sat. But his eyes stayed fixed on Marcus, and the expression in them had nothing to do with speed bumps anymore. This was the look of a man who had just realized he was facing an existential threat. The Meridian Towers construction cranes would stop tonight. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his apartment. The bronze survey marker rested on the kitchen table, 93 years of truth condensed into 4 inches of metal. His phone rang. Marcus. His Aunt Dorothy's voice was steady, but something ran beneath it, tension or anticipation or both. I've been watching the news. I think it's time. Time for what, Auntie? Time for you to read your great-grandmother's letters, all 47 of them. Dorothy paused. There are things I never told you, things she asked me to keep until you were ready. Through his window, Marcus could see the Atlanta skyline. The Meridian Tower stood dark against the clouds, its construction lights extinguished for the first time in 2 years. There's a letter about Warren Harrington, Dorothy continued, about what he said to her face to face the day before she got sick. She wrote it down while the words were still fresh. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up. The survey marker sat on his table, catching the last light of evening. 93 years ago, his great-grandmother had saved this piece of bronze because she believed the truth would matter someday. She was right, but Marcus was beginning to understand that the truth was bigger than property lines and forged documents. Something had happened in 1931, something beyond legal fraud. And whatever it was, Josephine Devereaux had made sure someone would eventually know. The question was whether Marcus was ready to hear it. The house in Decatur smelled like lavender and old wood. Marcus stood in his Aunt Dorothy's living room, surrounded by photographs that stretched back 4 generations. The Devereaux watched him from every wall, posed portraits, candid snapshots, faces that carried forward through time like a river carrying stones. Dorothy sat in her chair by the window, a bundle of letters in her lap. The ribbon holding them together had once been bright blue. Now it was faded to the color of old denim, soft with age. 47 letters, Dorothy said. She started writing them in 1931 after she got sick, kept writing until 1951, the year she died. Marcus took the bundle carefully. The paper felt fragile, like it might dissolve at his touch. Inside, his great-grandmother's handwriting waited, the same elegant loops he'd seen on the original deed. This one is different from the others. Dorothy pulled a single envelope from beneath the bundle. She wrote this 5 days before the forged deed was filed, 5 days before everything changed. The letter was dated March 10, 1931. Marcus read it standing because he couldn't trust himself to sit. 2 men came to my house today, Warren Harrington Jr. and another man whose name I did not catch. They offered to buy my land for $300, not even a tenth of what I paid for it 8 years ago. I told them no. I told them this land belongs to my children and their children. It is not for sale. Warren smiled at me, Not a kind smile. He said, "Mrs. Devereux, you're a sick woman. You might not remember things clearly soon." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer, but the way he looked at me, I felt cold in my own house. Cold in March. Marcus's hands were shaking. He set the letter down on Dorothy's coffee table, next to a photograph of Josephine taken in 1922, a young woman standing in front of the land she had just purchased, smiling like she owned the future. She knew, Marcus said. She knew what they were going to do. She couldn't stop them. Dorothy's voice was steady. She got sick that same week. Influenza. By the time she could leave her bed, the deed had been filed and the survey marker was scheduled for removal. But she paid someone to save that marker, and she started writing letters. Marcus picked up the bundle again, 47 letters, 20 years of watching the Harrington empire grow on stolen land. The last letter, Dorothy said, that's the one she wrote for whoever would finally bring justice. She addressed it to my family whenever they are ready. Marcus found it at the bottom of the stack. The envelope was unmarked. Inside, the handwriting was shakier. Josephine had been 71 when she wrote it. He read the final lines twice before he understood what she was asking of him. 3 days later, courtroom 8A was standing room only. Word had spread beyond the courthouse now. Journalists filled the gallery. Community members who had read about the case online crowded the back rows. Harrington development employees sat in clusters, their faces tight with uncertainty. Judge Patricia Ocaffer surveyed the packed room before addressing counsel. Mr. Devereux, you filed a motion to compel production of documents from the Harrington family archives. The defense has objected on grounds of relevance and privacy. Your Honor, Marcus rose, the documents I'm requesting are not attorney-client communications. They are family business records relating directly to the 1931 transfer. Specifically, I'm requesting the contents of Cabinet 3, Drawer 7, in the folder marked Historical Pre-1950. Teddy Nash was on his feet. Your Honor, how could the plaintiff possibly know the location of documents in my client's private archives? Marcus turned to face him. 12 years ago, the Harrington family offices were renovated. During that renovation, their historical archives were temporarily stored in county facilities for 3 months. I was working in the records department at the time. I catalogued every document that came through. The courtroom went silent. Harrington family assumed their private archives remained private, Marcus continued. They were wrong. Judge Ocaffer's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, of the scope of what Marcus had been building all these years. Motion granted. The Harrington family will produce the requested documents within 24 hours. The documents arrived the next morning. Teddy Nash reviewed them in the hallway outside the courtroom, his legal team clustered around him. Marcus watched through the glass doors as Teddy's face went gray. The memorandum was on Harrington Company letterhead, dated 1932. The typed text discussed resolution of the Devereux encumbrance. But it was the handwritten note in the margin that mattered. Warren Harrington Jr.'s own handwriting, casual and confident, the notes of a man who never imagined anyone would read them. Deed replacement filed 315, marker removal scheduled 322, no further action needed. 3 sentences that unwrote a century of legitimacy. Marcus watched Teddy show the document to Preston Harrington III. He watched Preston's face change, denial first, then anger, then something more complicated. The expression of a man whose entire self-concept was collapsing. When court resumed, Teddy rose. His voice was steady but different. The bluster was gone. Your Honor, my client has reviewed the produced documents. We request a brief recess to discuss settlement with the plaintiff. The gallery murmured. Judge Ocaffer turned to Marcus. Mr. Devereux, are you amenable to settlement discussions? Marcus considered. The moment stretched. Every eye in the courtroom was on him. I am, Your Honor, but I'd like to make a brief statement first. Judge Ocaffer nodded. Marcus stood and faced the gallery, the journalists, the community members, the Harrington employees whose jobs depended on what happened next. The original Devereux parcel, surveyed in 1923, encompasses 14.3 acres. At current valuations, The land alone is worth approximately $847 million. The Meridian Tower represents a $2.3 billion development. He paused, letting the numbers settle. But the parcel doesn't just include the Meridian Tower site. It includes 14 city blocks of downtown Atlanta, 6 commercial buildings, 3 parking structures, and portions of 2 residential developments, all built on land stolen from my great-grandmother in 1931. The scope of the claim filled the courtroom like a physical weight. This wasn't about one building. It was about an empire. The Harrington family's entire downtown portfolio exists because of that theft. Every building, every lease, every transaction for 93 years, all built on fraud. Preston Harrington sat motionless in the front row. His face was pale. Marcus reached into his file box and withdrew Josephine's final letter. But I didn't spend 19 years building this case for revenge. He unfolded the fragile paper. My great-grandmother wrote 47 letters over 20 years. She watched the Harrington empire grow on her stolen land. She could have been bitter. She could have demanded vengeance. But the last letter she wrote, the one she addressed to whoever would finally bring justice, ends with this. Marcus read aloud, "When the truth is known, let it be used for building, not destroying. The land was mine, but it was also my children's and their children's. What matters is not what was taken, but what will be created. Justice plants seeds. Vengeance salts the earth." He set the letter down. My settlement terms are as follows: full public acknowledgement of the 1931 fraud, establishment of the Josephine Devereux Memorial at the Meridian Tower site, creation of an affordable housing fund seeded with $50 million to be administered by a joint Devereux-Harrington Foundation, and the renaming of the Meridian Tower Plaza as Devereux Square. Marcus looked directly at Preston. I am not asking for the land back. I am not asking for $847 million. I am asking for the truth to be told and for something good to grow from it. The courtroom was absolutely still. Preston Harrington rose slowly from his seat. The arrogance that had defined him in their first encounter was gone. What remained was something more human: exhaustion, shame, and the first stirrings of something that might be respect. He walked to the bar separating the gallery from the counsel tables. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Mr. Devereux, you have a deal." 3 months later, the construction cranes moved again over the Meridian Tower, but the plaza at its base had a new name, Devereux Square. And in the center of that plaza, a bronze statue was being installed, a woman in period dress, holding a deed in one hand and a survey marker in the other. Marcus stood at the edge of the construction site, watching the workers position the statue's base. Dorothy stood beside him, her hand on his arm. She would have liked this, Dorothy said, not because she wanted a statue, but because she wanted to be remembered for something other than what was taken from her. Marcus nodded. The Atlanta skyline stretched out behind them, 14 blocks of buildings that would forever carry the weight of what had happened here, not as a burden, but as a foundation. Josephine Devereux had waited 93 years for this moment. Her great-grandson had made sure she didn't wait alone.